Hey y'all, who all's there? This is Jenny, and I'm one of the admins here, and we're going to talk a little bit about hooping and stabilizing and answer a few of the questions that y'all have posted. I'm going to try to keep up with comments and questions that you post, but if you remember from our last video, I don't have good internet, and so sometimes Facebook and the internet aren't kind to me where I am. So if you ask something that I don't get to address in this video, be patient and I will go back through all the comments and answer them, or I'll tag somebody that has better information than I do. But feel free to jump in and say hi and where you're from or where you're watching from, and just let me know what you're doing out there. My workbench is covered with some things to show you, so I'm going to adjust the camera. You don't need to watch me. You want to watch my table. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the things we're going to do. We're going to stabilize like a really thin Pashima type scarf. I'm going to show you how I stabilize towels and blankets and fleecy, thick, minky kinds of things. Hey Wanda, I'm from Mississippi. And then I'm going to show you, I have a special treat. In the video where we did the reading pillow a couple weeks ago, I mentioned doing buttonholes. And so I am going to show you how I'm doing buttonholes on a shirt. So that'll be a little bit different. Pennsylvania and Kentucky, whoop whoop, all over the place. Indiana, a neighbor, not too far. I'm in Nebraska, just in case y'all don't know. I'm a little bit south of Omaha. Go Alabama, my former next door neighbor. Florence, Mississippi, been there many a time, Wanda. In fact, I lived not far from there at Pearl one time, many moons ago. All right, so I'm going to adjust the camera so you can see more of my workstation, and I am going to start showing you some of what I have here. So let me move some of this out of the way. So the first piece we're going to look at is my 4x4 hoop. I have an Innoviz NQ1400E currently, but for the last 6 years I had a Brother PE770. So I use the same kinds of things that you do if you have a 770 or a 780. Many of y'all have a lot of different machines, and that's okay. Most of what I'm going to talk about today works for any of the machines. We're not really talking much about the machine. I may throw a tip or two in here or there, but I am mostly, hey Ronnie, glad you could join us. But most of what we're talking about today really is applicable to any kind of machine, because we're not going to really be talking about the machine much. I will be using my 6x10 hoop that I have for my machine, but it's only because I don't have another 5x7. And the size for today's purposes does not matter. So I have my 4x4 hoop, and yes, it looks slightly different from the 770s, but the hoop size and shape is the same. So the first thing we're going to talk about is I'm going to show you how to hoop this really thin, sheer, you can see the light through this Pashima scarf. You can see me through the scarf. It's really thin, and for a lot of people, stitching on these thin fabrics sort of freaks everybody out. And yes, it freaked me out at first, but I learned after making a few mistakes. So I have 2 layers of water soluble, and this is the brand and style I use. It is Super Solby Silky brand. So you can see what I've got here. This is exactly what I have. I've got it cut to about 7 inches square, 2 of them, maybe 8 inches. Yep, it's about 8 inches square. And I've got 2 of them, and I'm going to lay them together in my hoop. And then take the top and secure both layers nice and tight. And then tighten up my screw. Okay, and I'm going to gently tug it to make sure it's tight. So now I have my stabilizer hooped. And this brings us to a couple of terms. This is the way I hoop, and it's called floating. I'm sorry, I'm reading some of your comments. What I do is I float my project fabric onto my hooped stabilizer. That's the main meaning of the word float. I know a couple of people asked for that definition. And so, especially for Carrie, that is what float means. It means that you hoop your stabilizer nice and tight, and then you place your fabric on top. So what I'm going to do is I am going to find the end of my fabric where I would like to stitch maybe my initial. I'm not going to stitch anything today. This is just hooping. So if I want to find a spot, I'm going to lay down my scarf, and let's say I want it to go right here. So I'm going to take a pen, and I'm going to mark the top. You could mark it with a fabric pen. You could mark it by ironing you a square, but I'm going to just pin. Pins are my friend. I've been sewing since I was about 9 years old, and I am not afraid of pins. And so that's where I want my design to be. And you can do that with, on a scarf, there's not a right or wrong. So then I'm going to take, and I'm using the edge of my fabric as my straight up and down. So if I were really worried about it being centered exactly on a scarf, it's not that big of a deal because it's going to get tied around your neck and it's never going to hang perfectly straight. So I don't get really worried about the scarves. But I do want it somewhat straight. I don't want it really crooked. So I'm using this edge right here and sort of eyeballing it to make sure it's pretty straight compared to my hoop. And then I'm going to take and pin directly to my stabilizer. Now this is another secret. Notice I have slid my hoop over here to the edge of my table. I pin with my hoop hanging over like that. So I can touch the pin with my thumb, my fingers under there, and I can press very gently on the surface from up here down, so my pin goes down and back up very comfortably without putting a lot of pressure on my stabilizer. Southern Illinois, thanks. I'm just checking on messages, making sure I'm not missing anything y'all have to say that's important. So, and then I just take, twisted it and got it out of shape. Okay, so get it back in shape. And then I hang over another little edge, right over the edge of the counter. And pin again. And I do that all the way around until it is secured nice and in place. And so that winds up being how I secure a pashima type scarf. So, any questions about that? Like, that was pretty straightforward and simple, not very complicated. It's going to get a little more complicated as we go. But scarves are one of the easiest things to place because, like I said before, there's not really a right or wrong about where you put your monogram or initial or whatever. So if I wanted it centered in a particular place, I find my center and I fold my scarf in half like we did for the reading pillow, so that the inside is folded over together, and place it on my hoop. And that's the way we're going to hoop everything else. This is the only thing I do that's sort of willy-nilly like this. Yes, Regina, water soluble does go on top of a scarf as well. It sure does. I just didn't want to cut another piece because I'm not really stitching this. Water soluble goes on top of anything thin like this. I put it on onesies. I don't put it on certain things like decent quality t-shirts or heavier weight fabrics like a canvas or the thicker fleece type fabrics like this. Like, I don't put it on top of this because there's nothing. This is a pretty heavy duty fabric, and so it holds the stitches well, and there's nothing, no fleecy top like on the back. There's nothing that comes out like on a towel. The nap sticks up and comes through your stitches if you don't use water soluble. So Laura, go back and watch where I showed hanging it over the side. I'm going to show that again, but that takes a little practice. I had trouble with that in the beginning too. Was trying to get my pins in my project and back up through the top. It just takes a little practice. You just want to be careful not to push. The brand of soluble stabilizer I use is the Super Solvi by Sulky. And if you have a Joann's coupon right now, you can get this 60% off, I think, 50% off, because they got a good coupon today. I bought a new can of my spray adhesive. This is the brand I use. I've tried 3 or 4 brands. I do use 505 as a backup if I can't find this. And we're going to use some of this in a minute on some of our other projects. But yes, I do put water soluble stabilizer on top of my scarves. Okay, so move all of that back out of the way. We're done with our tiny little bitty hoop and scarf. Okay, so the next thing we're going to hoop is a little bitty shirt. What did I do with my little bitty shirt? I did not have a onesie on me or in my stash. I have an 18-month t-shirt, so it's little. And I say I had it. Here it is. Get it from myself. So I have an 18-month Garanimals t-shirt, and that's what I'm going to walk you through hooping next. Okay? So, let's stop and let me answer a couple questions. Sherelle asked about using pre-cut versus bolt stabilizer. That's a personal choice. It doesn't really matter which kind you use. Pre-cut saves time, but I buy these giant 100-foot rolls of World Widener off of Amazon, or Thread Art brand off of Amazon, and I just cut as I need it, because this to me uses less space for storage. So it's up to you really. Sometimes when I am in between lots of projects and don't really want to sew, but I want to do something constructive, I'll measure off and cut a whole bunch of these, so I have my own pre-made. Okay. Angela asked about the easy reminder, sort of like the what is it, if you wear it, don't tear it. I use mostly cutaway, this medium cutaway stabilizer for almost everything. I used to use tearaway a lot more, but I was using it mostly on towels when I was making lots of hooded towels, and I didn't have any trouble with it, but a lot of times the heavy weight of the towel hanging over the hoop, moving around on the machine, would sometimes tear the tearaway stabilizer. And so when I used that up, I just didn't buy any more, and I just use all cutaway. Cutaway washes up really nice and soft, and if you trim it really close to the stitching on the back, it doesn't cause a problem. So let me see what's the purpose of water soluble on top if it's not high pile? Good question, Irene. It's just for more stabilization. So especially on a very, very thin fabric, it helps to keep the fabric thin and from being pulled as the needle moves back and forth across the fabric, especially like on the Pashima scarf that I just had. You can see, if you look at this fabric, it's so sheer that even just putting my hand underneath it, you can see how the grain of the fabric, can you see that? Pulls. So a needle with thread with stress on that needle going back and forth, it will shift it out of alignment too. And so water soluble stabilizer is good for lots of things, not just keeping the pile down. It can hold your fabric still and keep it looking nice and crisp too. Let me see what other questions we have. Joyce, the name of my stabilizer is just medium cutaway, and I usually get Thread Art brand or World Widener brand from Amazon. I get the giant rolls. Medium weight stabilizer on the roll, yes. Yep, there are a lot, and I will try to find the link, but there's not many when you put in 100-foot rolls. They narrow down real quick. Thanks, Angela, for typing that in. So I don't see any other questions that I've missed so far. So we're going to go ahead and work on hooping this shirt. Okay, can y'all see that really good? There we go. Okay, so I've cut off my piece of stabilizer. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my table before we do this, because this table is integral to the way I stabilize. It is a 2-foot by 3-foot quilting cutting mat, and I've been using one of these for about 5 years, 6 years. I started embroidering probably 7 or 8 years ago, and after a year or two I found that this little puppy was great salvation at helping me to keep things straighter. So I take my center marks on my hoop and I line them up here on my grid that's underneath. So I can see that there's a straight line all the way across underneath my stabilizer, and there's a straight line all the way down under my stabilizer. So I'm going to leave this laying right here while we work on the shirt. So this is a tiny little bitty shirt, and onesies work the same way. I stabilize all my shirts the same way, by floating on my hoop stabilizer. So the first thing I do is turn my shirt inside out, and I match up my shoulder seams, nice and straight shoulder seams, and that gives me my exact front to my shirt. And then I come to the bottom and I line up my side seams. Now let me just tell you something. This is where you know a cheap shirt when you find it, because a lot of times certain discount kinds of stores will sell brands that don't line up nice and straight like this one does. This is a Garanimals brand, and I like stitching on Garanimals brand. Some of the other brands, not so much. My favorite to stitch on is our blanks, ARB blanks. I like them. They're nice and heavyweight. I also like My favorite onesies to stitch are Old Navy, by the way, nice and thick, way better than the Gerber or the Carter's. But now I have a middle. Now I have my front center. And so I finger iron. Normally I take this to the machine, to the ironing board, and I iron that down, but for our purposes, we're not going to do that. So I'm going to take, this is the top of the shirt, and we're going to pretend I'm doing a 5x7 upright design. So I'm going to lay my neckline right up there at the top edge of my hoop. Oops, I forgot to spray. No wonder it's not sticking. Y'all let me forget that. And that's all the spray it takes, y'all. It doesn't take much. You just want enough to hold it down while you're working. You don't need to glue the Leaning Tower of Pisa in place. Just press all that nice and down. You see it's along my nice straight edge. I don't know if you can see better with my light off. Is that better? So now you see it's nice and straight. And then very carefully, I'm going to slide my hand up inside my glued shirt. And I'm going to gently, ever so carefully, flatten out the front of my shirt. And then I'm going to turn this around where I can pin the top first. I'm going to slide the top. Can you see? I'm going to slide the top off the edge where I can just get my needle pressed in. And so that's what my pin looks like now. See? That's the very top of the shirt. And I always put the shirt neckline right at the very edge between this spot and this spot. Okay? But I don't want to stitch over. This has a little ruffled-y thing here, so I don't want to put stitches on that. So Irene wants to know something about Pellon 809. I have not used 809. But I see where many embroiderers do use that, Teresa, and I don't know that anybody has a problem with it. It's a good product. Is it the same as iron fusible? Well, no, because mine is not ironable. Mine is either pinnable or spray adhesive. However, many people will use the iron-on polymesh. And if you use that, you want to do it first. You want to iron it onto the shirt before you do this step. You still would hoop your cutaway and then attach this to that. So you would wind up with 2 layers of stabilizer. Okay, so after I've pinned the top of my onesie into my stabilizer, I turn the hoop around and I pin the bottom the same way. See? And then I go all the way around, turning my hoop as I go, so that only the part I'm pinning hangs over the edge, and that way I am more likely to keep pressure on the stabilizer even, so I don't press too hard and cause trouble. So just keep going all the way around. I'm going to shorten this and not put as many pins for y'all. But this gives you a good idea of how to get it nice and secure. Now, there are basting stitches, either some built into machines or some that you can buy from designers, so that after you get this pinned in place, you can take the hoop and project over to the machine and run a basting row of stitches around the outside of your design. And then you could remove a lot of the pins. Never, 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 never run your embroidery machine over your needles. Always pull them out. I see many people complaining that they babysit their machines. I babysit mine after all these years of doing this. because sometimes a needle gets too close to the design or whatever, and I want to be able to hit that little green button and say stop right away. So then I take and turn my shirt back right side out. So it looks like this now. And so I'm going to gently pull the shirt out of the way of where the stitching and machine will be. And I'm going to pin it to the outer part of the stabilizer, outside the hoop. I have a pink picture that I often post and share with y'all about hooping or stabilizing as a floating method, and it has packing tape. And yes, I take packing tape and will take and tape this part to the back. The tape will go all the way around. I just happened to be out of packing tape today, or I would show you, and I didn't know we were out. So the packing tape would go around and only come to about ½ inch around the back side of the hoop, because you don't want packing tape being stitched by your needle. You want to keep that off the machine. And so then I pin all the way around to get all of this shirt out of the way. And once you've got it, the shirt really pinned to your stabilizer, you can twist and pull on this outside part all you want, and it's not going to move much at all. It's not going to impact your design or your stitching. Ooh, found a rough spot. Didn't want to go through there. But that is how you float. Okay? And so those puckers are from the gathers at the top of the neckline. I will hold them flat or make sure that their stitching doesn't mess with those as it goes through the machine. Yet another reason to babysit your design. Now, on most onesies that people use, on Gerbers or Carters, most of the brands, you absolutely need a layer of water soluble on top, and you also need to float another layer of cutaway. What do you mean, float another layer? The other meaning that I mentioned a while ago, there's two meanings to floating. One is this, that you float your project. You don't put it between the parts of the hoop. You float your project on your stabilizer that's hooped. The other meaning of float is to take another piece of your medium cutaway. This is from a scrap. I keep most of my large scraps. And spray just a tad of your spray. You turn this over and you put it right here in between your pins. Sit it right inside those pins. Nothing's attaching this, but just a little bit of spray adhesive. So it'll hold it in place till it starts stitching. Once it starts stitching, it's no big deal. It'll stay right there. And so sometimes when y'all are asking about how to add more stabilizer, this is how. You'd add 1 or 2 layers here. Let me check comments and see what else I need to see. It's about to ask about the pins in the machine. Yep, you don't want to ever stitch over your pins. Okay, so I think we're doing good. All right, so now somebody, I don't know if it was in our group or in another group, I was helping somebody this morning early. She had a really, really, really dense fill design. And when the outline was stitching, it was way off of her fill that had already been stitched. The outline was stitching last. And so I was instructing her to hoop a layer, to float a layer, but then a third layer would actually have gone on the hoop stabilizer under the shirt before you put the shirt on. So you'd have a total of 3 layers of cutaway before you ever put the shirt on. Does that make sense? Y'all with me? Fill designs are really dense and they create a ton of friction and damage to your fabric. So you want enough stabilizer to hold your fabric solid so that it doesn't just stitch away and literally be sliced up into bits. So that brings us to an important question. Is there a possibility of too much stabilizer? Yep, you can overstabilize. If you put too many layers, you're going to wind up with tension issues and thread breaking, because the friction is going to cause the thread to shred. So the general rule of thumb that I go by, most of the good embroiderers go by, is for every 8,000 to 10,000 stitches in your design, you use 1 layer of medium cutaway. If you have a really dense design with 30 or 40,000 stitches, you may want to use 1 or 2 layers of heavy cutaway instead of medium. It's pretty stiff, but you still want to just be careful. You don't want to just throw a layer in just for good measure. You want to make sure you know why you're using the products or layers that you're using. Okay. So that's how we would put, and this would go on the machine just like this. If for the Gerber and the Carter onesies, I would definitely float water soluble on top, but this is a good Garanimals thick t-shirt. I probably would not put one, but you can if you want. It's not right or wrong. So let's look at my questions again. So Angela and Carrie had asked about hooping versus floating, and that's a personal preference as well. Many people hoop, many people float. It does not matter. Whatever works for you is what you need to do. I had trouble because when I first started, I was just making t-shirts for my grandkids, and I never could get that stretchy knit straight. I couldn't get the designs to be straight no matter what I did. And so that's where a lot of people try the fusible poly mesh, because it stretches less once you iron that on the back. And then once you're done with your design, you can peel off the outer edges around your stitching and trim it just like you would this. And it offers a nice, secure stabilizer base to work with. I always pin my water soluble, because if you spray your adhesive and try to stick it to it, number one, it's on the top of your design. Some of the glue doesn't come off of some fabrics, vinyl, some products that you're putting on there. You don't want to mess that pretty design up. But number two, some of the water soluble Solvay will dissolve when you spray the glue on it. So never spray onto the surface or put it on anything that's going to touch the pretty side of your design. So that's a good question, Victoria. Jamie says, will the onesies, wouldn't medium cutaway irritate the child's skin? No. The train of thought just disappeared. The cutaway will be soft after it's washed. I do, however, let me show you another product I use. I bought black for y'all today so you could see it better on the screen. This is a Pellon product, and it is from Joann's. It's on the bolt with their stabilizers and such. This is a knit interfacing. So you'll see it has a little bit of stretch to it across, but up and down vertically it doesn't have much. And so on shirts or nightgowns or whatever I'm making that might rub the skin, the chest of a little one, I will iron a rounded off piece of this over the inside of the shirt. It's like cloud cover or Tender Touch. This stuff does wash off after a few washings, but after 2 or 3 washings, the cutaway is soft and doesn't irritate anyway for most people. Now, there are kids with sensory perception problems, and you want to keep that in mind, but you may even want to supply those parents with an extra piece of this for when their piece comes off, they can iron another piece on or something. That would just be nice customer service. Do your iron on something? Yep, that's what I do. This is Pellon, iron on, knit interfacing. Normally this is used like in clothing, like for buttons or whatever, to stiffen and secure garments, but I found it to be a good substitute for cloud cover, and it's easy accessible because I have a Joann's right down the road. Came in late, but thanks for all the tips. I missed the type of machine you're using. I'm using an Innovis NQ1400E, but it is like the 770's big brother. So they're very similar. They stitch out the same. They look almost identical, except my screen is color. It's still about the same size. Is there a right or wrong side? I don't know about that. Maybe one of the digitizers and designers could tell us for sure. But when I use it, I put the rough side down so that it leaves airspace between my stitches and my fabric. Does that make sense? There is a smooth side and then there's a rough side. So I don't know which side's right or wrong, but that's how I put it down. That way it leaves a little air underneath the stitches. Any other questions so far? I think I've tried to catch them all. If I haven't, I promise I'll go back and type in comments and answer you. So the next thing we're going to do, let me look at my list of questions that I already answered. Definition of float, hoop versus float. The easy reminders, Angela, I don't know of any other easy reminders. The one that we all use is if you wear it, don't tear it. Jamie says, perfect, thank you. I tried ironing on Pellon, featherweight on a shirt, and it wrinkled the cutaway. Yes, don't use steam. Don't use steam for anything on applique or embroidery. I will tell you this. This is my big tutorial tip of the day. Steam your shirt when you're ironing to find center. When you're ironing that shirt down in the very beginning and you're identifying the center mark you need to hoop by, steam that. If the shirt's going to shrink, it's going to shrink when you put it on the ironing board and you steam it. After that, cut the steam off of your iron and don't cut it back on till you're ready to iron something else another day. Like never, never, never use steam. Steam will pucker your shirt or your cutaway or your fabric or your threads. It will not do well. Don't steam anything ever, 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 ever. Does that make sense? I can't see all your comment, Jamie, and I don't know how to get the rest of it, but I'll go back and look at the rest of it. Wouldn't the rough side be the adhesive? On the water soluble, it's not sticky. It's plain. It doesn't have a sticky side. There are some brands that do, but the kind I use is not sticky. Okay. But I'll go back, Jamie, and read the rest of your questions and see what you have. Okay. So then let me see what else I have on my list. So we talked about the layers for Jamie and Joyce. They asked that, so I answered that. We're fixing to talk about layers of, aligning design and fabrics and how to hoop fleece for Margaret and Joyce. And included in that is going to be how I stabilize towels for Donna. And I think that'll pretty much cover most of the questions I knew about ahead of time. Referring to the rough or adhesive side of the black interfacing. Yes. Oh, I get you, Lynn. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. You're right. The rough side is the sticky side to the cloud cover stuff. Yep. My bad. I was not following along. Sorry about that. Maybe it's time for wine. Okay. So next, it's getting dark on my table and we'll cut my light back on, see if that'll help. Okay. Millington. Where's Millington? Is that in Nebraska? Oh, I'm going to show you something odd. So we're NASCAR fans, and we went to the Texas race last weekend. This is my granddaughter's souvenir, and she asked if I could embroider some things on it for her. She wants the date that we went to the race, and I forgot what else. I'm going to have to Marco Polo her and ask her, but maybe the winner or her name, I don't remember. But anyway, I'm going to fix that in my Embird software, and then I'm going to bring this to my hoop and put it on my stabilizer. And so to find where I want the date to go, which is going to be across the top above Texas Race Fan, I'm going to take and fold this so I can find the center, the top and bottom center. And then I'm going to take a pen and mark my center on that fold. And it's easier to say that than it is to do that with a pen that wants to be wonky. Okay, then I know I want my row of stitching to go right across this second layer of squares. So then I'm going to find center for that. And yes, it won't come off the stick. I tried. So then I'm going to fold that to find the center of that row so I can get my stitches centered in there. And then I'm going to lay my hoop stabilizer down, and I'm going to line these up just the same way I did before. That's my center. That's the center mark up and down. And then I'll line this up on the center mark going across so that my letters will stitch right inside this frame. And I'll pin this, and then I'll have to sit and hold the stick because I could probably jerk it off there, but then I'd have trouble getting it back on there, and I just don't want to deal with it. It's easier just to stitch it on there. So that's an oddball item that you might find helpful. That's how I hoop everything. So to do towels, blankets, minky, thick stuff with pile, that presents a little bit more of a challenge. So you'll see, this is my giant hoop I told you about. Let me check messages right quick. Yes, Lynn. I'm actually talking to a designer right now about doing a sale, special priced item for you for a special sew along tutorial that we're going to do sometime in the next week or two. And if you have something specific you want to learn about, just let me know and we'll try to do a video about it. Can you make a video on how to rehoop a shirt for a larger image or saying? So helpful for the videos. Yes. In fact, Deanna, I did somewhat do that in the prep video that's in the files in the group for the reading pillow. I did the preparation video and showed how I measured out each piece. And then, because so many people do two hoopings, we'll pretend this is the pillow, they'll do a face or design on one side and then a bunch of words on the other side. So I showed how to center your piece of fabric and then you would hoop accordingly. But a shirt makes it a little bit more difficult. And so yes, we can consider that as being one of our next tutorials. The frame I'm using right now is a 6x10. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I have a NQ1400E. That's an Innovis machine. It's sort of like the 770's Big Brother. It's just a step up. And so this is the hoop it stitches on without having to reposition anything. So yes, it's lovely to have this size. I used to be restricted to the 5x7 in the 770, so I fully understand. But I needed to have another hoop ready so I didn't have to take time and switch things out. So sorry, Penny, this one is big. But you'll see I've already marked with pencil my center lines. I've connected my center marks from each side of the hoop and the top and the bottom of the hoop. And now we're going to hoop a huge blanket the one this is just a quilting cutting mat. It's 2 feet by 3 feet, 24 inches by 36 inches. And it sits on the Target cubbies. Like the front one is a 9-hole cubby, and then the 2 back ones are 3-hole up and down. It's just a 3-column cubby shelf. And there's one on this side, and then there's the 3 on the front. If it weren't so messy, I'd show you a picture. But you know, it's Christmas time, so it's all a mess. So I've got this hoop. I'm going to turn this direction for my blanket, because it's a huge blanket that I am embroidering for my daughter to give my granddaughter for Christmas. So it's this huge blanket. It's really just a nice throw, but for embroidery purposes, it's huge. So, and it's even got pom-poms on the side. So this, the front side, I'm going to show you a close-up, has this very thick pile, and then the back is just fleece. Okay? All right. So my daughter wants the monogram that I've put in embroidered and saved to stitch. She wants it placed at the bottom of the blanket in the center. So she wants the design about here. Okay? So here we have the whole blanket. And here's the side that opens to the inside. And then here's the middle of the back. Whoops. Dumped my water over. So I have folded this to find the center so that the front where the stitching is going to go is to the inside. Okay? And I have my center right here. So I'm going to hold on to the edge to make sure I keep it centered. The stitching is going to go right here. Very carefully, we're going to turn it over so that I can get it on my hoop. I'm going to spray just a little bit. Got my squares lined up, and I want to make sure my letters are above. It has a row of stitching the way it came. And so I want to make sure I stay well above that. The letters that I have digitized, or I didn't digitize them, I merged them, are about 3 inches tall. So they're nice big fat letters so that they'll show well through that thick heavy pile. So this is my center. We're still square. So I'm going to take and lay on my straight line. I'm going to pick this up so you can see. So I've got the center of my blanket, the back side. Does that spray go on your cutting mat? Only if I spray too much, too big. I spray literally real focused right in the center of my hoop. I don't spray the whole hoop. I just spray for about 1 or 2 seconds with an aim for the center. If I can get the center stable, I'll pin the rest. I'm not worried about it. So see how this is just staying right there. So I'm going to lay this down. I'm going to carefully open up my blanket. Very careful so I don't get it shifted. The other thing with fabrics that have naps, like towels and fleece and minky, when you're preparing to stitch, you want to make sure that your nap folds the right way. Like if you don't want to stitch it and hang it in a bathroom, if your nap is going to go up, it's going to be pointing up. You want it to lay nice and flat. So you want to take your hand and carefully iron down all of the nappy parts of the fabric. And then we're going to pin this in place. Let me unhoop some of my salvie from a while ago. So all of my nap is laying the right way down. And so then I'm going to take my salvie and once again slide the edge of the hoop off the edge of the counter so I can carefully pin all the way around. I'm not going to pin as much for y'all as I really would for stitching. But you get the drift. And when I get done with pinning, if you'll go back and find my pink picture, I'll post it on this thread when we're done, you'll see that pins are back to back all the way around my design, and it's pulled nice and flat and tight, and laid down flat. And then take this to the machine. Now when you have something this big and bulky, you cannot let this hang. The weight of a blanket or a towel hanging off of your embroidery arm will pull your fabric out of place, and your hoop will go with it, making your design stitch wonky and crazy and not right. Okay? So you have to think about, where is this weight going to go? What are you going to do with it? I happen to have an extra long workspace at my desk where my machine is. So I carefully pile some of the excess up on the end of the table. I have pulled another table or a TV tray or a chair or a stool over toward my work area to be able to drape some of the weight when I do really, really big, long, heavy things. When I was in Kenai, when we lived in Alaska a couple years ago, I made a queen size rag quilt for my granddaughter, and so I did the embroidery part on it because it was a rag quilt in pieces at the beginning, but once I was sewing it all together, the weight of it was pulling on my arm and my leg and my machine and everything else, just trying to get it combined. So we had a couple of things piled up to pick up the excess. You have to have that weight managed. You can't just let it hang there. It will pull your embroidery arm out of place and move the hoop. So you want to make sure that that's careful. That's carefully considered. So next, I want to mention something that's a little bit of a controversy, and I've saved it for last because of that. But first of all, let me just say, some machines are very forgiving. Some machines won't worry too much about the thickness of your project. The 770 sometimes is very finicky and very picky and won't do well with added thicknesses. So machines have a tension adjustment for a reason. This is getting hot. Do y'all mind if I cut that off? Okay. A tension adjustment is on sewing machines to allow for tighter or looser stitching and or thicker or thinner fabrics. So when I stitch on this, for example, this is probably, even mashed down, this is probably a 1/2 inch thick. Without mashing it down, it's probably close to 5/8 of an inch thick. And so to ask thread that normally covers the thickness of a t-shirt, which is about a 1/16 of an inch, to cover 5/8 of an inch, you're asking that thread to stretch to the max, and that causes broken threads. Some machines don't mind. Some machines are very forgiving and you won't need to adjust your tension, but you need to be aware that when you are stitching thick fabrics, you might want to consider reducing your tension to -2 or 3 or 4 and testing a few stitches to see how your machine responds to something this thick. I found that on my 770, most towels thick blankets like this, more than one layer of fleece, I would have to stitch on -5 for the most part, occasionally -6, to allow my machine to let the thread be not stretched and pulled so tight. On dense digitized designs, like if you're doing a field design and there's lots and lots and lots of stitches in a small space, or like on some of the peakers, the eyes are very detailed, those areas sometimes require either extra stabilization and or lower tension. And so just think about those things. It's not a hard and fast rule. There's not a right or wrong. You just have to kind of learn what your machine and what your supplies and what your skill level are able to do and get out of your machine. Okay, does that make sense? On my NQ 1400E, I stitch everything on -0, -1, or -2. Like, I've not used anything lower than that for anything yet. I haven't done any towels on her yet. I've done dish towels, and I did some bath towels last fall. Some volleyball towels. I do use vinyl on a lot of my designs, and the vinyl is thicker than fabric when you start adding layers, and it doesn't give like fabric. And so that's another reason that some people will need to lower their tension adjustment. Any other questions? Any comments, any questions, anything you want to know more about? Let me say this. Bobbin thread is a hot topic in most of the groups. Nesting and troubleshooting is a massive obstacle to deal with and very stressful. So I'm going to touch on a couple things with that right quick, if you don't mind. Number one, the PE machines, the embroidery only machines, are meant to use 90 weight bobbin thread. If you're using a PE machine or an embroidery only machine, you need 90 weight bobbin thread for normal regular embroidery or applique. If you're doing freestanding lace or specialty projects, you can get away with doing lots of other stuff. But for new people, just learning, you want to start with what is basic, and that is 90 weight bobbin thread. Manny wants to see an example of some of my vinyl. Let's see what we got here. Okay, here's an Easter shirt I did last spring. It's been in a pile. I'm going to make a quilt with this, so it's not very pretty, but you can see the basket is a fabric, and then the shiny parts, the eggs and the bow, are all done with glitter vinyl, marine vinyl. The two places I get vinyl from are Micri World, M-I-K-R-I, and from Wendy Skaggs, Sweet and Sassy. Blanks, I think is the name of her group. But there, if you'll scroll across the recommended groups at the top of our group page, you'll see lots of groups up there. Micri World has a group, and so does Wendy with Sweet and Sassy, and they both sell them. There's a few other Punk Broidery. There's several other places, but that's what it is. It is not the stuff from Hobby Lobby or Joann's. This has a thin, clear layer of like a sealer or whatever over the glitter. The stuff from Hobby Lobby has glitter on it that you can literally scratch off with your finger, and when you wash them, they will shred. Shed, not shred. The glitter pieces will actually shed off of your design with the ones from Hobby Lobby. This particular kind is great because it seals it all in. You can't touch glitter. It's nice and smooth, and it holds up well. This is from last Easter, but I have a box full of stuff over here that I've been making 4 or 5 years. So that's about the vinyl. But yes, if you want some more questions about the, if you have other questions about the vinyl, I'll try to answer them. But back to the tension. and threads. The SE machines, the sewing and embroidery machines, are designed and calibrated to most effectively utilize a 60 weight bobbin thread. Embroidery thread is 40 weight. So it matters most of the time what kind of thread you're using. And some machines are picky about brands, even good brands. Some machines just won't like them, but you just have to kind of learn what your machine likes. I recommend buying 2 or 3 spools of 2 or 3 brands and seeing what your machine likes before you invest hundreds of dollars in thread. My Penelope, my 770, liked and preferred Sulky. I was trying to remember which brand it was. I tried Thread Art, I tried some Polystar, and she would use them. She would use them okay, but the best that she liked was the Sulky thread from Joann's. Well, that gets pricey. Finally wound up finding a set of them and ordered them off Amazon. But then I had to send off Penelope to have some warranty work done, just sort of a checkup and stuff. And we lived in Alaska at the time, so I couldn't be without my machine for 2 to 4 weeks. And so I bought a Futura embroidery machine, a Singer. And it had a bigger sewing field, and so I liked it. But it did not like the Sulky thread. So I wound up having to have 2 sets of thread, 2 sets of needles, 2 sets of everything, because the machines just did not cooperate and get along. Finally, I broke down and tried some Robinson Anton thread, and oh my God, it was like heaven. Both machines liked it. And so when I moved out of Alaska, we sold everything. I sold all my machines and bought brand new when I got here in Nebraska. So my NQ 1400E likes the RA thread, and so that's what I've replaced and been using since I got here. And then for her, I do buy the pre-wound, but my 770 would not use pre-wound. It didn't matter if it was the Brother 90 weight and I paid $500 a spool for it. She did not like it pre-wound. I had to wind all of her bobbin myself every time I used her. So does that make sense about all the thread? The thread weight really does matter. If you're doing specialty stuff, scratch all that I just said, it's totally different. But for people just learning the machine, PE machines use 90 weight. The sewing combo machines use 60 weight, and then the embroidery pretty colorful thread is 40 weight on top. Joy says, what would you use for a stabilizer for burlap? For burlap, I typically do buy tearaway. Yep, tearaway. And I cut it away. I don't tear. Burlap is one of those threads like the Pashima scarf I showed you a while ago. Burlap will pull and get out of shape very easily, and so I don't tear away from burlap when I sew with it. I either will use water soluble in the hoop, depends on how big a design I'm stitching, or I will use tear away if it's a big design, and then cut away from that. I do not tear from burlap. Does that make sense? What other questions do y'all have? Anything? I'm so glad y'all joined us. There were about 70 of y'all on here, so that's really fun. I will get with Anne and we'll try to decide when to do our next tutorial. I think we're going to make an in the hoop stocking. What do y'all think? Does that sound fun? I hope y'all learned a little bit. I'm not an expert, and there might be a better way or a more right way than what I've shared with you, but I started embroidering about 7 or 8 years ago, and most of what I've learned from groups like y'all. I've learned from YouTube, and I've learned by trial and error. And so I just thought I would share a few things that have helped me. Informative, great tips. Thanks for sharing. Oh, from Australia, Marlene, you go, girl. So, hopefully, thumbs up for the stocking. I thought so. I think it's going to be fun. I need to make a couple for a ministry, a donation thing for a ministry I'm going to do. So I was like, oh, that sounds good. I can do that and wind up donating it. So if you have other questions, please feel free to post them here or in the group, and I or someone will come along and answer them. But anyway, y'all have a great week and enjoy the cooler weather, hopefully in your neck of the woods. It's about 40 here. Bye, y'all.